Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Floodplain Management Services Program overview and our Planning Assistance to States and Tribes overview. We're excited to talk to you about our two programs today and share some information about how you can be a part of these programs. Please remember to just put your name in the chat, introduce yourself, and thank you for joining us. I'll start off with some quick introductions. My name is Kira Baltutis. I am a community planner and the district tribal liaison for the Chicago district at the Army Corps of Engineers. And with me is Dave Hanwork. He is our planning section chief, and we work together pretty closely on these programs. So we'll go over a quick agenda. You might be wondering, what is the Floodplain Management Services Program? We'll give you an overview of that, talk about some of the types of services and our common deliverables. We'll give you some examples of current and past studies and what those proposal cycles look like. There's two of them throughout the year and those deadlines. We have one upcoming in June. And then what is the process for submitting those applications? And then we'll also talk about our Planning Assistance to States and Tribes, also known as PAS, and then our Continuing Authorities Program. And then finally, we'll wrap up with our Tribal Partnership Program. So what is FPMS? That's the acronym I'll be using for Floodplain Management Services Program. You can see on our right, those are our Chicago district boundaries. So that's our area of responsibility that we operate within. And for the FPMS program, we're really identifying flood risks. So we provide information, technical support, and guidance to communities on flood hazards to guide floodplain development, but also urban flooding issues. And the proposals that we put forward seek to reduce flood risk through a lot of nature-based or non-structural means. That's really the purpose of this program, is that approach. And it does not result in design and construction because this is a study. So we don't move into that phase, but it helps set a foundation for any other programs that you want to pursue for the construction design. We really like to prioritize economically disadvantaged communities, those that need the resources, those that need our technical support. We really like to work with them. So we do prioritize them as part of the applicant pool. And for these studies, they typically take about 12 months, but they can extend up to 24. And those are for those studies that really have a lot of modeling involved in some of that complex data. The budget that we operate within is typically about 50 to 100,000. We don't really like to go over 150K because this is a competitive program, as you can see in the next bullet point. This is not a grant program. So when we talk about funding, we're really pricing out the cost of our labor. We come in as the technical experts. We receive funding internally through the Army Corps of Engineers headquarters. And so we don't allocate funding to the communities. It pays for our work and we come and work with you. It's very collaborative and we do that over the course of the study. And for these studies, they'll start for this application cycle, they would start in FY25, we're estimating. And that is, so that for that start date, for those of you who aren't aware, it would be after October 1st. And so these are types of services that you can see on the left. We provide some general technical services where we either obtain the data or we create it ourselves based on a lot of mapping data, based on a lot of information that's out there. We do outreach to communities and different municipalities, other public entities. We do work with a lot of different stakeholders in these studies because while the primary partner is a government agency, we understand that contributions and information come from a lot of different entities. So we can work with state agencies, the local agencies, nonprofits as part of a contributing consortium. So we're really excited to work with all different types of stakeholders while that primary non-federal sponsor will be a government agency. We also provide general planning guidance on the floodplain management planning. So that's kind of that long-term planning. And then we also do all sorts of materials that we do outreach with to these communities and to agencies and entities. And so on the right-hand side, you can see a variety of common products, and that's the output of these studies. So anything from flood proofing to inventory of flood-prone structures. If you have a lot of vulnerable structures in your community, we can do an assessment of tools and processes. We can do a green infrastructure inventory. What would it look like to map that out in your community? And most recently, that's not on this list, we actually just finished up a few ice jam workshops in the state of Indiana. So that's something else we have just recently added to our portfolio. And as far as past and current studies, we'll just run through a few examples for you. We have one ongoing in Posen, Illinois. We're assessing some flood-prone areas for a pretty overloaded combined sewer system there. So we're looking to see what the highest risk areas are throughout the community and assessing those risks and then providing recommendations. Because as part of all of our report, we not only provide our entire analysis, but we also provide recommendations so that you understand what the next steps can be taken. And we're also looking to remove the village from FEMA's Zone A. And so we're doing that in partnership with MWRDGC. It's a long acronym, but many of you may be familiar with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And then we also finished up in our last fiscal year 3 studies in the East River watershed in Wisconsin, for those of you on the call from Wisconsin. These 3 studies, we did a combination of stakeholder outreach and coordination through a fairly large workshop. We did an assessment of the existing flood warning system with a gauge that needs to be installed. And they also did a flood storage analysis. That was kind of the more data analysis piece of this. And we had a variety of study partners on this, which made it a very robust group and a very collaborative group. So we worked with the East River Collaborative, which is based right in East River Watershed. We worked with Brown County Emergency Management, the City of Green Bay, and the National Weather Service. And another study that we finished up in FY23 was the Kankakee and Yellow River, Indiana Flood Preparedness Plan. So we had 3 workshops across 8 counties. It was very substantial. We also worked with one of our tribal partners in the state of Indiana. And these workshops really centered around flood planning scenarios and mapping exercises for emergency responders. We presented on some pretty substantial tools that communities need around flood preparedness and response planning, which we found to be very beneficial. And we did work with a lot of different partners for this, which is usually how we approach these, a very collaborative approach. And so we worked with the 8 counties, Indiana Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Homeland Security, National Weather Service we work with pretty closely, and USGS. So that was a great group to work with. And so you're probably wondering, how do I apply for this? So for this particular cycle, it's called the FPMS base cycle. And it's a very simple process. You would actually just submit a letter to myself and Dave. You can see our contact information up on the screen. We can help you in that preparation, but essentially the letter will just include information on the nature and location of the flooding. But you can email us, call us if you want to talk through that. But once we receive that letter from you officially, then we start talking about what solutions that we would propose and some of the different types of challenges that you're facing. And we work to build out a bigger application on our end that we then submit internally. So it's competitive, but again, it's a very collaborative process with us because we do want to submit a very strong application that hopefully gets awarded. So the deadline for this is June 7th, 2024, but we really appreciate earlier coordination if possible. We know it's coming up in just a few weeks, so we understand if maybe you can't make it till that deadline. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to myself or Dave. And we will also distribute this presentation after we wrap up, so you can have access to our emails if you're not copying them down now. And then for our PS program, I'll hand it over to Dave and he'll walk through that with us.
Okay, so the Planning Assistance States and Tribes is basically a program where we do a lot of work similar to the floodplain management study, but it's a little bit broader in scope. So we look at a pretty wide variety of water resources type challenges. So we've done some water quality modeling. We are currently working on a fish passage study up in Wisconsin. For these, it could be, again, we have a non-federal sponsor, which it could be, doesn't have to be a state. It could be municipal or county governments, or in this case, even nonprofit organizations can serve as the sponsor. Again, like the FPMS, doesn't provide federal funding for design and implementation, but sometimes it lays the groundwork for future project work. It's typically a 50-50 cost share, and I'll explain that red asterisk in just a second. So it's 50% federal, 50% non-federal. The non-federal share can include work in kind. So if your organization is contributing labor to developing the study, that can be creditable and count toward your 50% cost share. As I mentioned, it's a pretty broad range, and these studies can be larger in size than the floodplain management services. So we've got a few of those that are, up into multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of our overall budget. Next. So a little red asterisk is a cost share waiver. So in 2022, Congress passed a section in the Water Resources Development Act that provides for 100% federal funding for these studies for economically disadvantaged communities. So instead of 50-50, it could be 100% federal. The economically disadvantaged community is defined as either a federally recognized tribe or an economically disadvantaged census tract within the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, or CGIS. That's a tool that was developed by the federal government to try to identify EJ communities. And you see the link there for where you could find that on the web. It could also be an area that has a low per capita income or an unemployment rate that's at least 1% greater than the national average. So you don't have to worry about the details of figuring this all out for yourself. So we can assist in determining if you're eligible for the 100% federal funding cost share waiver. And then we've got a couple examples. So this is one we finished up last year. So this is the Chicago Waterways Restoration and Framework Plan. So this is countywide, looking at the Chicago area waterway system, so the Chicago River and some of the connecting channels as well. This was a multi-agency study involving the city of Chicago, the Park District, MWRD, and the Forest Preserve District, looking to improve recreational ecological function of the waterway system. And this one will be one of the foundational documents for an upcoming Authorized Corps of Engineers, a larger feasibility study that we're just getting funding for this year. And then another example is one in Wisconsin. We're working with the Metropolitan Milwaukee Sewerage District. Up there, they've got a lot of miles of concrete lined channels and as well as enclosed culverts. So the focus of this one will be to look at all those concrete channels and try to see if there's a way to improve ecological functioning while still maintaining the drainage capacity for flood control. So we're working with MMSD on wrapping that one up this year and doing some prioritization of which ones we think are the highest likely to result in a positive outcome. I want to talk a little bit briefly about the Continuing Authorities Program. So this is a program where Congress has authorized the Corps to plan, design, and construct projects. So these are different sections. There's different sections of Water Resources Development Act that basically delegates the authority to the Corps. So we don't have to go back to Congress every time to get authorization. These are also cost shared. It has to be a governmental entity as our cost share partner. The feasibility phase, the planning phase, is a 50-50. The implementation, the design and construction, is typically 65% federal, 35% non-federal. There's typically a cost share limit for the federal investment of about $10 million. It is a very, very competitive program. There's a lot of demand for these. We got a few examples here. I just listed out a couple of ecosystem restoration projects. We're doing some creek restoration, or Redmond Pond doing some dam removal for ecosystem for fish passage. And we also just finished up last year a flood risk management project in Joliet. We're looking at doing levee rehabilitation to protect the city of Joliet.
So we'll wrap it up with our tribal partnership program. So as I noted before, I'm the tribal liaison for the Chicago district. And this program walks through all of the phases of both a study and a project. So from the initial foundational phase of doing the research and then moving into the design and construction, depending on what the needs of the project or study are. And so it really works to address tribal lands that substantially benefit federally recognized tribes, so projects on those tribal lands. And so the Corps is responsible for all feasibility costs up to $648,000. The USACE is responsible for all construction costs up to that same number, and anything over the 648 number for either the study or construction are shared with the tribe. So you can see that 648 number is repeated. And this is a number that can change annually or every few years. It really depends on how much funding is available. Right now, this is the kind of number we're adhering to. And so for the tribal responsibilities, all feasibility study and construction costs above that number are shared by the federal government. And so you can provide it as an in-kind service, and that can be negotiated as part of the cost sharing agreement. So that is, again, a conversation that is had once the tribe express interest. So if you do have interest in that, please reach out. I'd love to speak with you about it. There's a lot of great things we can do in terms of flood damage reduction, ecosystem restoration, erosion and sediment control, watershed and river basin studies. And the TPP program, it can get into, tens of millions of dollars. If needed, it goes pretty high. And so this is something that can make a pretty large impact depending on the needs of the tribes. And so this is something that we continually encourage tribes to look into and express interest if they'd like to work with us. So if you'd like to learn more, my email address is at the bottom, and I look forward to speaking with anyone who's interested. We want to thank everyone for attending today. We really appreciate you giving your time and energy to us. Again, my name is Kira, and I'm here with Dave, our planning section chief. And our contact information is below, but please expect to hear from us regarding, any follow-up on this meeting with the website where our FPMS program is advertised and the information about that, as well as follow-up to this presentation so you know when our due date is for the FPMS program and the information that we share today. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.